Good evening, and welcome to our second lecture in Knowledge Unleashed, an NLC Symposium. My name is Dr. Hugh Gordon, and tonight I would like to welcome Dr. Issoufou Soumaila, who is presenting our next lecture, What is Money?
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Hugh, for the introduction. Again, my name is Issoufou Soumaila. Today's lecture is about money. We're going to go over some talks regarding money. The interest for me started as, as an economist, studying development economics and especially inflation in developing countries. So in graduate school, we study mostly theory, right? And then read a lot of papers, empirical papers. And my opportunity actually to kind of confront theory and the practice is when I work at central bank. And at that point, that's where I was really as an insider to see how actually the money creation process works. And then I did some research while at the central bank. And I think, money is one of the most important topic that is not really well understood by common people. So for me today is just really introduce the topic, and hopefully as we go with this public lecture, I'll go to the next phase of what money is. For now is really just really go over the basic of money. So all the technology or all the tools that we use as money, yes, it goes back history, centuries back, but we still have, we're still using them sometimes, concurrently, okay, as we'll see in today's lecture, okay? So I'll go quickly over the, history pre-money, like history before, how do we exchange goods and services before money, and then go over basically the two theory of money, because in economics, we have two theory of money. We have the credit theory of money, and then we have the commodity theory of money. I want, the interaction to be, the presentation to be interactive. So if you want to stop me and ask me a question at any time, just feel free to do so. Of course, we have, also a Q&A session at the end of the lecture. So let's go with before money. So we're all familiar with the barter system, right? Because it's a system that we still have today, right? So sometimes we exchange goods without even without using fiat currency, right? I want your motorcycle, you want my, I don't know, my wash and dryer, we can do the trade. So that's just, the barter system. So long back, again, I think someone's saying something. He's having trouble hearing. Hearing, okay. What about now? Can you hear? Is it better now? Maybe they can't hear me. Can you hear me? Can I have a thumb up? Okay. I think Teresa said yes. Okay, maybe I just need to come close. All right. Better? It's kind of okay? Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I should sit down or something. I should maybe sit down or something. So, I can just, I guess, close. Maybe, yell a little bit. So, yeah, that's the reason. Well, I can maybe take it. Better now? Better? No? It's good? Okay. Well, I'll hold you. I just gonna hold it like that. Okay. So, before, like I mentioned, we don't have money. So for instance, a fisherman, would have to trade, fish for meat with the hunter, right? So this is really important because as we go over the next slides, it's really important to understand that the hunter or the fisher spend the energy to actually gather the fish or the animals that they hunted, right? So in this case, then they have to trade, right? They will trade fish for meat. The only aspect that actually facilitate this process is something called double coincidence of wants, right? So for this to happen, we need the fisher must be willing to accept, animal for his fish and vice versa, right? So that kind of, facilitate the trade. And up to today as well, that's what happened if we barter, right? The only way we barter is because the two parties accept to exchange the good and services without involving money, right? As we know it today, okay? So what is the limitation of the barter system? Of course, the lack of double coincidence of want, right? If I want your fish, but you don't want my meat, then we can trade, right? That's one of the limitation of it, right? Another limitation is the transaction cost. Like, okay, if I cannot find someone who wants my fish, then I have to go try to see where I can find someone with meat, so who is willing to accept my fish, right? So there is transaction cost, which in terms search cost, right? The time that you spend to try to find someone who would accept your good or your service that you want to trade. Okay. We also have something called divisibility issues, right? So it's kind of hard. Let's say if you have moose, which is big, and you just want to trade something for the moose, right? So if you have to, maybe you don't want to divide the moose into different parts, right? You just want to trade the whole moose for something else. So because it's really hard to divide it, so it's kind of hard also to make that kind of trade, right? So that's one of the issues also of the barter system. Okay, again, we still do it. We still, we do the barter. If you go to Kijiji or FSJ now, you will see people saying willing to accept this for this, right? That's just barter system. So we still have it, but it's more. It was more common before the invention of money. And then we have the ledger system. So the ledger system is actually the foundation of what we will see later, the credit theory of money. So the ledger system, is one of the oldest, bookkeeping, if you will. Okay, so essentially it tracks credits, right? So there's no money involved. So let's say the issue that we have with the barter system, right? You have to find the double coincidence of want. Maybe in this case, then the fisherman and then the hunter can have an agreement. I don't want your fish now, but I will give you my meat, and then a month later, maybe you're gonna have something that I would like. So, but we're gonna have to write it on a ledger. Okay. So it's kind of like credit, right? Again, the sensitive system we have it today, right? So essentially, really, if you go, we're going to discuss it later, banks is just based on that as well. It's just a big ledger system, right? So it's kind of based on social consensus, right? So the only way this would work is if I trust you, if there is a trust involved, right? So again, long back 5,000 years back in ancient Mesopotamia, that's what they used to use. I think the picture there is just one of the ledger system that was used long before money was invented. Okay, so it just keep track of who owes what, who owes what to whom, right? Again, it requires trust, because without trust, then it's impossible to use this to trade using the ledger system, right? So basically, before money, that's what we have, right? So that's what we have, and then I reemphasize that we're going to see it later that we still use them in modern economies. Okay. So we're going to start with commodity theory of money. Okay, with a history. Okay, so we're going to go over some properties, right? So I know I try to make it as common to as common as possible. So when you hear sellable, it means that we can sell it, right? Sellable means sellable, okay? And then when it says across scale, it means like we can divide it into small pieces, right? So that's what sellable across scale mean. Scale means just, you know, the weights, right? We can divide it in different weights, okay? And it's sellable across space, which means we can sell it across space. It means it's portable. We can move it from point to point in geographic area, right? Areas. Sellable across time, it means it's durable. It's something that is very durable, okay? Like we can keep it, and then 1 year, 2 years, 3 years later, we can still use it as money, right? It's verifiable, so it means like, you know, we cannot counterfeit it, so people are able to verify it, right? Okay, and it's scarce. So there is a concept in economics called high stock to flow ratio. So stock is something that I usually give the example for my student. You know, you can think of stock as the water coming from the faucet into the bathtub. The water in the bathtub, if you block the sinkhole, that will be the stock in the water, right? The bathtub the water in the bathtub would be the stock of water, and then the water coming from the faucet will be the flow. So high stock to flow means, you know, the water coming from the faucet is too tiny to actually compare to the stock that we have. Essentially what that means, it means like, you know, it's too hard to dilute, right? It's too hard to bring a bunch of it such that it's bigger than the amount that we already have available, right? So that's what scarce mean, right? It means like it has high stock to flow ratio, okay? We'll see again, because these properties, we're gonna apply them for different commodities, and then we'll see how they apply, you know, really well to these commodities. And also it has, you know, good money, commodity money has monetary premium, right? So commodity are usually something that have an intrinsic value. They have an intrinsic value. It means like, you know, even without using them as money, they are useful, right? We can use them for something else, and we'll see example of that. So they have, you know, monetary premium. That means, you know, in addition to the utility premiums that they have. So we can use them as money. So I can give an example, as we'll discuss extensively when we reach, you know, for the gold and the silver. But think about gold, right? Gold we can use as jewelry, but we also can use it as money, right? So the utility premium would be using it as jewelry, or, you know, for dentistry or some aerial aviation. But also if we use it as money, where we trade it, then it has monetary premium as well. So that's what monetary premium means. So I'm going to give you a list of, you know, not complete list, but some of the commodity money that we use, and maybe we still use even today, right? So the one that I put in bold, I don't know if you are able to see the until silver, that's the one we're going to discuss, but there are others, you know, that I haven't listed here too, right? So we have raystone, shell and beads, cattle, salt, tobacco, gold, and silver. And then we all have also like copper, alcohol, you know, cowries, barley. They all were used as commodity before. Okay. So let's take, you know, a couple of example, and see what it means. Okay. So one of the one classic example of commodity money are raystones. Okay. So raystones actually, if you can see the picture there, they are kind of, you know, circular disc with a hole in them, right? And they are really, really heavy. They can weigh up to 4 tons, right? Okay. So they were brought from Yap, I don't know if I pronounce it, Yap Island, which is part of current Micronesia, from neighboring Guam Island, Guam. So Yap Island, they don't have the raystone, but they really, really like them. They love them actually, okay? So the only way to have them on Yap Island is to transport them but you can see how heavy they are to transport, right? Okay, so because they are heavy, you have to display them in public places, right? So that, people will see, but the ownership is actually kept with, a ledger system. So, in the community, they know who the railstone belongs to. And then when there is trade, it just transfer of ownership on the ledger. So everyone in the community will say, okay, I use this for my transaction, so the railstone no longer belongs to me, it belongs to who now? And it's kind of social consensus that people understand that this belongs to to Hugh now. Okay. So what's the issue? What's make railstone money? Well, again, like I mentioned, they are really beautiful, and Yap Islanders, they really like them, okay, for their beauty. And then they're also scarce. For them, it's scarce because it's heavy to bring, on that island, okay? So for that reason, they have really high stock to flow ratio. So it's kind of hard to bring, more into the island, okay? So like I mentioned, ownership is transferred through the ledger system, and they're also sellable across scale. So we have different sizes of them, even though they are heavy, but we have, different sizes of them, okay? And they're also sellable across time, meaning they are durable. So when a commodity is sellable across time, which means durable, it means that people use them as a store of value, right? So they can keep them for as long as they want because they know they're going to keep their value, right? Okay. So what's the issue? So there is an Irish American by the name of David O'Keefe, I guess, he's like, he came to Yap Island and then he said, they like, he is a trader. He trades coconut, like, so the island is really have coconut in abundance. So he came on the island and then he realized, hey, they like, the railstone. He's kind of, I guess, like you don't say, right? So kind of, saying, well, I can kind of bring, more and then get, trade them for coconut, right? So what he did, all right, thank you. All right, I thought, all right. So he went back to Asia and then he assembled like, human resources like laborers and then big boat. And then he went, on neighboring island and, brought a bunch of, raised like essentially destroying one quality of the raised meaning raised are no longer high stock to flow ratio because he's able to bring more than the stock that is available on that island. So the problem of that, essentially it creates some kind of, problem on the island because some people think, yeah, it's still, the raised stone. We don't care how he's able to bring them. But some people think, no, his raised stone are not like the one we have because his is easy to bring, but it's the same, right? So it created so much chaos on the island, and they created civil war and then essentially destroy, if you will, the raised stone as money because essentially he flooded the island with raised stones, and then therefore they're no longer scarce, and therefore people stop using them as currency. So that was, if you will, the end of the raised stone. But if you go on that island up to today, you can still see them, right? But of course they're not using them as money anymore. Okay, for transaction at least. Another example is commodity money is shells bids, right? Okay, so we have different form of bids, and shell across continents. Okay, they are mostly used for jewelry, so they have intrinsic value, they have utility value, right? So you can see that just like the raised stone, people like them just for their beauty, right? Okay, so we have Dantilium, I think, on the Pacific coast of North America. We have bead made from ostrich eggs and animals like lion and the wolf, and then animal teeth. Okay, and then we also have, I think it's called agri beads in West Africa made from glass, and we're going to emphasize on that one, the beads in West Africa. Okay. So what makes actually shell beads, especially beads, agri beads, I guess they call them, they were labor intensive to make. It takes time to make, right? Okay. They are also scarce, like they have high stock to flow ratio. Okay. They are portable. It's easy to move around. So meaning like it's sellable across space. Okay. And they're long lasting, like they are durable. Okay. So it means like, they sellable across time. Okay. Like I mentioned, they also have, premium value. Okay. In addition of being just, jewelry and wearable, okay, they could be also be traded for goods and services, right? Okay. So one of the things that, especially in West Africa, what they did, they used them as long-term savings. Why? Because again, they are sellable across time. It's easy to keep them and then to use them later, right? So they kind of savings. People use them for savings, okay? And being wealthy back then means like, you have a bunch of them, pretty much. Just like today, if you have a lot of money, you are wealthy, right? Okay, depending on where you live. If you live in Zimbabwe, maybe having a lot of money doesn't mean you are wealthy, right? It depends. So what's caused the demise of beads, especially agri beads? Okay. So the technology to make beads, because they are made of glass, especially the agri beads, they are made of glass, and the technology in Africa and West Africa was kind of rudimentary. So it takes time to make. At the same time, in Europe, Western Europe, in England precisely, the technology is so advanced that it's easy for them to make the beads. So what they did, of course, just like O'Keefe did in Yap Island, they just, they produced a bunch of them, and then they brought them to West Africa, and then they exchanged them unfortunately, for natural resources and even human resources, like, slavery, right? And again, just because they are able to kind of, bring a bunch of them, okay, they decrease the high stock to flow ratio. So essentially, we have, more coming than the existing that we have. So imagine if, let's say, we have 1 million, and then they're able to bring 2 million at, in one shipment, then the value of it gonna decrease, right? So again, that causes actually the demise of agri-beads as money in West Africa. So we can see the pattern here, right? The pattern is, every time, okay, a new technology, okay, is invented, it can disrupt the existing tools that we use as money. Other form that I'll go quickly over are cuddles, which are again used even right now, in many parts of the world, right? They have, utility value because, we use them for meat, right? We eat the meat. Okay. They're also sellable across space. Okay. So we can move around the cattle, right? But they're not sellable across time and scale, right? So, they don't come, it's really hard to keep the cow, I don't know, for some period of time, right? Unlike gold, for instance. And also the scale is kind of, hard because, it's just one cow. Yeah, they might have different weight, but it's kind of difficult to use as money for that reason, okay? Salt is also another one, okay? They also have a nutritional value. They're sellable across time because the durable cell is usually durable. They are divisible, meaning they are sellable across scale, okay? And one thing that, maybe we're not aware of is like, the word salary actually comes from, the Latin word called salarium, which means, denominated in income. So it means like, long back, people were being paid using salt, right? Okay. But it's not scarce. That's one of the problems. Salt is not scarce. That means it doesn't have high stock to flow ratio. And then we have tobacco, which is really in the United States, in southern state, for a long time, they use tobacco as money, right? Okay, they have monetary value above utility value, of course, because people smoke them. They're not sellable across time, meaning we cannot keep them for a long time. We can't use them for savings, for instance, okay? But it's still being used as money, right? Where? Mostly in prison, right? If you don't want a horrible thing to happen for you, you either have to be strong or you have to have a bunch of cigarettes to have someone to protect you, right? So, right. So, now we go in terms, the next level of commodity money, gold and silver, right? Gold and silver. So what actually make gold and silver the best commodity money? Okay, we're going to reintroduce the concept that I mentioned earlier. They are divisible, portable, durable, very durable actually. Units are similar, right? You can verify the authenticity of them. They have high stock to flow ratio, meaning they are really scarce. And even if you have to actually have new gold, you have to actually mine it. So that's what make it actually, that physical constraint make it to have high stock to flow ratio. Again, how high stock to flow ratio means it's hard to dilute. It's hard to bring a bunch of them and then destroy it as money, right? Okay. Another thing is that they have monetary premium above utility premium or utility value, if you will. Okay. So that's the reason actually gold and the silver won the commodity war, because I consider it to be war, right? Okay. So we're gonna dig a little bit deeper. Okay. So when I say high stock to flow ratio, it means really the stock of new gold or silver coming into the market is tiny compared to the one that we already have available, right? So essentially, the average growth rate actually of gold is 1.5 to 2%. Silver is a little, easy to mine. That's the reason, the growth rate of silver is higher than gold, right? And that's what actually makes gold more desirable than silver, because silver is easy to mine than gold, right? Okay. So for the past 1,000 years, really, the gold stockpile, like the stock of gold that we have, it's been increasing, steadily, right? Because again, because of that physical constraint, you actually have to mine it. Okay. Yes, you can use new technology to mine it, but still you have to mine it underground, right? So again, both were used as money, okay, but silver, the supply of silver is more responsive to price. So when the price change, when the price of silver goes up, there is an incentive for miners to go mine silver, and it's easy to find, so they can flood the market with silver. Okay. So, but gold is more difficult to mine than silver. So, solubility across scale, it means, the one thing that, one of the reasons actually gold and silver won the commodity war is because of this property. We can actually kind of, have them in different sizes, right? And in different density, in different fineness, okay? So the word coinage, okay, means like, we are able to make gold like in a tiny as a coin, okay? And then we can easily, it's gonna be more easy to transact and more easy to carry, like solubility across space, right? Silver is more divisible than gold. That's one good property of silver that gold does not have. It means like it's easy to manipulate and it's easy to make in different shapes than gold, okay? So, but this property though, actually make many countries in history to use gold and silver as a legal tender. Legal tender means, it's a decree by the government, we're going to see it later, that require citizens to accept them for transaction, right? So there is an economist called Lil Alden. She recently wrote a book called Broken Money, okay? And she's the only one, I think, who classified this in terms of layers. So she kind of, classify gold and silver in terms of layers. So the first layer is the intrinsic value, so the utility value, like jewelry, the use in industrial production, all those things, okay? The second layer is the verification and the convenience, right? So it's convenient to use, okay, as coins, like as currency, okay? Now the third layer is the liquidity premium. Liquidity premium is the value in excess of the utility premium. So essentially what it means like gold has two values. So there is the jewelry part, like the value that we use gold as jewelry, and then there is an excess premium, which we use gold now as currency, as medium of exchange, as money that we use for transaction. Okay. So essentially, if we don't use it as money, as medium of exchange to transact, then the value of money of gold should collapse to its utility value, right? But the value that we have back then is higher than the utility value because people use it for transaction. And then the hallmark of this is the so-called gold standard, right? So between 19th and the early 20th centuries, I'm going in huge, domain here. I'm going into history. So gold emerged as the most widely used commodity money. So remember when I told you, like, silver is more divisible than gold, but now because people are able to use gold as money and they use, paper money, so gold essentially becomes more divisible than silver. So as a result, because again, people prefer gold than silver because gold is hard to mine compared to silver. So because of that, actually, gold now emerged as the only commodity currency that is mostly used, okay? Because now people are able, they don't have to use the gold itself. You can have a certificate that show that you own a gold, and they use that paper to show that, it's essentially a claim. It's just a claim that you have gold, and then you can use it for transaction, okay? So this is due again to technology, okay? And then we have gold, we have denomination in gold based on different value of banknotes, right? Okay. And then like I said, the hallmark is the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944. 44 countries after the war, toward the end of the war, I guess, they signed an agreement, and then they decided to use something called the gold standard. And the way it works is that, the American dollar gonna be the currency of the world, but backed by gold. So essentially, I think for each ounce of gold in the bank vault, central bank vault, they should have $35 in circulation within 1 percentage point, right? Within 1 percentage point. Okay, so it means like the amount of money that we have in circulation should match proportionally to the amount of gold we have in the vault in the central bank, essentially here in Fort Knox in Kentucky in the US, right? So what that means, country is still gonna have their own currency, but the currency become the derivative of the US dollar. So it means like the French francs would be pegged to the US dollar, knowing that the US dollar is also pegged to the gold, right? But then all the 44 countries decided to, all the reserve gold that they have, they're gonna keep it in Fort Knox in the US, in Kentucky, right? So that was the deal, right? And then that's actually what's the initiate, if you will, the origin of why the US dollar is still the dominant currency in the world. We'll talk about it later, okay? But until 1971, what happened in 1971 is that prior to that, actually de Gaulle, at that time, the French president, he noticed that actually the US is not keeping the gold to US parity. So there are more US dollar in circulation than there are gold in the vault. And then he asked, the French portion of gold to be bring back to the US, I mean to France, right? So what happened is like, at that time Nixon said, okay, well, obviously we have a problem. So what we can do is just like, we're gonna remove that parity between the US dollar and the gold. So now the US dollar in 1971, the US dollar is no longer pegged by gold. Essentially, we have a bunch of US dollar in circulation that is not backed by gold, as in the period of Bretton Woods. Okay, I mean prior to Bretton Woods, also even in the 1914, gold was used also as reserve currency. Okay, but even then after 1971, now most country, I think the last country to remove that is Switzerland. I think, I don't know if it's like early 2000 or in the 90s, they remove the gold as as the reserve currency. Okay, but to this day, many central banks, I mean all of them actually have a stock of gold as part of their reserve. Okay, so they have the currency, but also have gold. In fact, in recent year, with all this geopolitics going on, most central bank, especially the central bank as China, they've been accumulating a lot of gold, right? A lot of gold, and then because in preparation maybe for something, who knows? So, right? Okay. So again, like I mentioned, gold is still used, as reserve. Okay. Now we go to the credit theory of money. Okay. So the credit theory of money is based on really what we discussed earlier. It's based on the ledger, right? So it's not really based on commodity. It's not really based on commodity. It's based on a ledger system. Okay. So what is fiat money? Okay, so Bank of Canada, I think on the website, they said fiat currency. So when I say currency or money is kind of the same, right? I mean, there's some kind of nuances, but we don't need to go into the details here. But just think of currency or money is kind of the same. Okay, fiat currency is money that is obtains that obtains its value by order of a government policy or law, right? So it's kind of decree. The government says you have to accept it for transaction. In fact, if you said no, you can go to jail for that, right? Okay. So the fiat money is just backed by full faith of government to keep its value, right? Okay. So what happened essentially, in general, we're going to see other way that we actually print. We introduce money. I mean, we put money in circulation. But essentially, the credit theory says like government issue debt in fiat money, right? So government, they issue like they bond, right? Like treasury bonds or T-bills, all those things, and then they issue them in their currency, in the country's currency, right? And then the government will require you also to pay taxes in the domestic currency, right? So that's what actually caused people to use, because they know that the government would accept it. In fact, you can use it for transaction, and then if anyone says they're not going to take it, then they can be thrown to jail because of that, right? So what are the functions of modern money, right? So actually the three functions that we have here, all the sellability that I mentioned earlier, they actually, you can find them there, right? So one function of money is a medium of exchange. So it means we use it for transaction, right? So essentially it eliminates the problem of double coincidence of want. So we can just use money to transact, right? So if I like your fish, you don't like my meat, I mean, then I can just give you money, and then you can take the money and then you can buy something else with it, right? Another important function of money is store of value. Again, that's sellability across time. So store of value means like, if I don't want to spend my money, I can keep it for 3 months, 6 months, a year, or even 10 years if I want, right? Because what is money? Essentially, most of us who work here, we spend our energy, like I mentioned, just like the hunter spend energy to hunt, okay? We spend energy to work. And then as a compensation, right, we get paid salary. And that salary represents our energy. So we can store our energy for later use. And that's what saving is. And that's what, store of value comes from. So I can store some of it for later use. And the money should fulfill that function. A good money should fulfill that function. And then money is a unit of account, meaning we use it as a yardstick, right, to measure value, right? Okay. So that's one, because without that, we cannot really tell, right? So if we just trade, yes, maybe over time, we're gonna establish some kind of unit of account to say 2 fish for, I don't know, for a goose or something like that, but it's kind of too complex because it depends on the weight of the fish, all those things. So it's kind of, whereas with money, it's easy. We know that, it's just, this thing costs $2, right? So we know the value of it. So that's the reason money is also used as a unit of account, okay? So that's the modern function of money, okay? So then how is money created, especially using the credit theory, okay? So essentially, if you deposit $100, especially in Canada. If you deposit $100 at the bank, and then that bank turn around to lend that $100, essentially that $100 becomes credit. Why? Because let's say I deposit $100, or let's say Darren deposit $100, and then I go to the bank and then borrow $100. And then I take that $100 and then I go spend it, right? Okay. So the problem is, or not spend it, but maybe do something else with it, whatever it is, spending or saving it or whatever it is, right? Let's say for the sake of argument, I deposit in the bank, in another bank, right? And that bank will also take that $100 and then lend it to another person. So essentially what happened, the way the system is created, is based on faith. It's just like, we all not gonna come at the same time to ask for our $100, right? Because if we do, the bank might be in trouble, right? Especially if they don't have, enough liquidity, right? The only reason they're doing that because they know that we all not gonna come at the same time to ask for our money, right? So this is based on what is called the fractional reserve banking system. Fractional means like, for each dollar that is deposited, the bank is required to put a percentage in a vault. So they're not allowed to touch it. But in Canada right now, the fractional reserve ratio is 0. So essentially, yeah, if you deposit $100, the bank can hand the full $100. Yes? Yeah, so in Canada, yes, that's a good question. In Canada, we have CDIC. So essentially, you have a protection up to 100,000, I think, per deposit, per account, right? So so it's just like in any insurance, right? In insurance is like, if things happen, then the insurance must pay, right? So and that's giving you some kind of, if you will, appearance of, the system is kind of solvable, right? But obviously, if you have more than $100,000, so anything above that, if the bank goes bankrupt, you're not gonna get that money, right? So people would actually put maybe small portion in many banks, but that's not convenient as well, right? So that's the issue, right? So I don't know if you listened to 6 months ago, I think it was, I don't know, last year or early this year, I don't remember. In the US, there's quite a few banks that actually were insolvent. And then the Federal Reserve and then the Treasury, they have to intervene to kind of, to at least, to limit the contagion, right? And to put trust again back to the system. Because it's all, really, because it's based on credit, it's all based on faith. So if there is no faith in the system, the whole thing gonna collapse, right? So so that's the reason we have that insurance. We have CDIC in Canada, and in the US they have FDIC, right? So again, it's just to protect and to say, okay, if you have a small portion, if the bank goes bankrupt, at least you are, as long as the bank is CDIC insured, right? So if it's not insured, then if they go bankrupt, then you don't get anything. And that's another point though. So when you put your money in the bank, don't think your money is actually there, and don't think it's yours either, right? So one of the best example that I can give is the analogy of a valet, right? So if you bring your car and then you give to a valet to go park, really you don't expect the valet to go and then do Uber with your car. You don't expect that. But banks, that's what they do. You deposit your money and then they go do risky stuff with your money, right? So that's the problem with with banking system, especially with the fractional reserves banking system. Now, there is also a good thing about it, right? Because that's how we are able to get credit too, right? So for the government, that's also when they spend 1 billion, for instance, that 1 billion, they have maybe 3 sources of how they collect the 1 billion, right? They get they raise the 1 billion. They can either collect it by tax, by selling goods and services, like if you renew your passport, or there are some services, government services that cost money. There is money through that too, or which is the big one, they actually issue debt, bonds, treasury bills, right? So whenever the government Canada issues money, issue bonds or credit, they usually that create money in the system. Yes, it's not direct, like the central bank doesn't just it goes like indirectly. So that will investor will buy the bond, and then the central bank would actually buy the bonds in part of monetary policy, and then that's how they print money, right? So they print money essentially whenever the government issue new debt, as we will see using the graphics, right? One thing that you need to keep in mind is like, fiat money doesn't cost money really that much to produce, right? Unlike gold requires that you mine. You have to really physically work to get the gold out the ground. Fiat money, you just printer, right? You just print the money. And now it's actually even electronic. You don't even need to print. It's just really all electronic, right? It's really electronic money, okay? Balance transfer, okay? I don't know. Sorry. So how do we measure money then? How much money we have in circulation, okay? So again, I'm kind of simplifying it, right? We can classify into 2, base money and broad money. Base money are just money in circulation, that what you have. I saw Pamela has, a bill in her pocket. So that's part of the base money. It didn't say that? Okay, yeah. And then we have, bank reserve, right? That's part of the base money. And then we have broad money, which includes base money. So everything in base money will be included in broad money, but also plus other financial assets, right? Financial assets like, term deposit, GIC, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what broad money is, okay? So let's see base money in Canada. Okay, so base money in Canada, if you look back to 2000, it's kind of, so the amount of money in circulation, the base money, is going steadily until what? Until COVID hit. What happened when COVID hit? Well, people were not working, and then more importantly, we have what? CERB. We have CERB. So how did CERB? Well, that's really more like, money creation. That's kind of straightforward money creation, because the government, Canada Revenue, was sending checks to people who were hurting, okay, for the right reason, right? But again, that creating debt in the economy, which means the the Central Bank of Canada would have to monetize that debt, and that's what happened. And then we see, like, money, the stock money in the Canada went exponential, like exploded, right? It's coming down now, right, because of the monetary policy that they're doing by raising the interest rate, okay, through again open market operation. But just think of it as, they actually trying to do damage control now, right? That's what they're trying to do. Okay. So the same thing also similar to US. US as well, they have something called similar to SERB, they call it stimmy check, right? In the US, they call them stimmy check, right? People were receiving money for not working, and that also exploded the base money in the US, right? Okay, it still is coming down as well in the US, but just like Canada, they're also doing damage control now. Because the problem with, as we'll see later, the problem when people start losing faith in the currency, then that will be the collapse of that economy. Okay, so that's the reason they have to do it. They have no choice, otherwise people will lose faith in Canadian dollar or US dollar. Okay. Yes. Ukraine, yeah.
Huge, vast sums of money that we could barely even comprehend.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
Yeah. So again, they will issue that. So they will issue like a bond. The government would actually have to issue bond, and then investors gonna buy them. Is like institutional investors, like banks, big banks, insurance company, investment company. They're gonna buy them, right? And then what will happen is that down the road, the Central Bank of Canada, would actually gonna buy them from them, right? And then whenever the central bank buys something, they buy them by issuing money. So they literally have to print money to buy the goods, right? I mean, or the debt from the. So in essence, what happened? They do what they call open market operation. So when institutional investor buy the government debt, so obviously they're going to give the money to the treasury, like in this case, the Ministry of Finance or. Oh, okay. He's saying to. So Pamela was asking, like, Trudeau is promising for spending trillions of dollars, and then where did that money come from? So that's what I'm trying to explain to her, right? So when they buy the bond, they're gonna give money to the government, and that's where they're gonna get the money to give to Ukraine or Israel, right? But in response, though, in return, if you will, the Central Bank of Canada, Bank of Canada in this case, would actually buy now the bond from the institutions that buy the back, right? So because where the institution can wait until maturity and then go to treasury to get the money back. But most of the time, they don't want to do that, right? Maybe it's a bond that is mature in 5 years or 10 years. In this case, maybe after holding the bond for 2 years, they're going to say, I just want some cash, right? And then the Bank Canada will actually buy it from them. Now, when the Bank of Canada buys it from them, they're going to give the bond to Bank of Canada, and in return, what do they receive? The Bank Canada would have to give them cash. So that's what actually happened. What's the trades, happen. So when the Bank Canada kept them until maturity, now they're gonna return it to Finance Canada, for instance, and then that's how the loop is closed. But in net effect will be more money in the economy, right? Yeah, we're going to discuss about inflation. Yeah. Yeah, no, I will discuss inflation for sure. So quantitative easing is just, yeah. So when they buy straightforward, like, when they buy straightforward the bond from um, from the institutions, that's called quantitative easing. So that's what, but when they do it through open market operation, that's a plan. Like open market operation is just for the central bank to buy and sell government bonds, right? So that's kind of, based on schedule. But when they decide to say, we're not going to look at that, the economy is in trouble, companies need cash, and they hold government bonds which are not liquid, because remember, a bond is not liquid. It's just a certificate, a promise of um, of um, of repayment, right? It's not cash. But if companies are in need of liquidity, the only option for them is to liquidate the bond for liquidity. So what happened, like during the 2008 financial crisis, that's exactly what happened. Companies were in need of money, in need of cash, but they have a bunch of, government bond. So the Federal Reserve told them, just bring all the government bond that you have, I'm going to give you cash, right? And then again, if you have cash in the economy, that will increase the base money, because treasury bills are not cash, right? But if I exchange treasury bills for cash, then the base money going to increase, right? And then we're going to discuss, who benefit from this actually, right? We'll discuss it. Okay. Argentina, that's, exponential, parabolic, right? That's also, just like, US and Canada, it just went parabolic after, 2000. Well, since 2015, it's really going up, right? We can see it here. Since 2015, the base money was going up, okay? And it's keep going up. In 2 days or 3 days, I think in Argentina, they're gonna have an election. And one of the candidate who's the favorite candidate who's likely to win, he claimed he actually promised to destroy, the whole system. He even promised to destroy the the central bank of Argentina, to kind of close it because it's not working, right? Because many countries in Latin America, they have, no central bank. They use dollar, right? They use dollar. They don't have, like El Salvador that doesn't have a dollar, doesn't have a local currency. They have, they use dollar for transactions. Zimbabwe is even worse, right? We can see and this is actually not scaled, right? So even prior to, even back to 2012, 2013, it's actually worse. It's just like now it's really, really, really bad, right? So we'll discuss inflation. That's what I'm gonna circulate the bills, and then you will see, okay? So the stock of money in USD, in US dollar, the value of it, right, is exponential. It's going parabolic, right? Just keep increasing. The same thing in Turkey, okay? In Turkey as well is going up. Since 2019, it started going up. It's still going up, okay? So we can see the base money is actually going up, which means what? Which means definitely fiat currency doesn't have high stock to flow ratio. Definitely we can see that here. Even the best one actually don't have the best stock to flow ratio. So what are the most traded fiat currency in the world? Well, US dollar. US dollar is by far the most traded, currency in the world, right? Followed by euro, the Japanese yen, the British pound, the Chinese renminbi, okay, and then Australian dollar. And in 7, we go to Canadian dollar. So I just want Canada to appear too. So I say stop at 7, right? But Canadian dollar is 7 in terms of transaction, right? In the world, right? So that's the foreign exchange, like trading across the globe, okay? So make the US dollar the king of all currency. Why the US dollar is dominant, okay? Well, essentially another question is why the US dollar is the world reserve currency. Like I mentioned, that back to the Bretton Woods era, right, in 1944. Okay, but one of the reasons is because the US institutions are really stable, and the US economy are very, very strong. I mean, the vitality of the US economy is unmatched. I mean, even people, China is getting close, but it's still by far the US is the world economic powerhouse, right? So that's one of the reasons. And the reason for that is because of euro dollar. So what's euro dollar? I know the name might be misleading because euro dollars are just dollar outside the US, right? It started in euro. That's the reason the name euro dollar. But even the dollar that we have in Canada, the US dollar we have in Canada, they call it euro dollar, even though Canada is not in Europe, right? Okay, so why euro dollar? Well, again, because people use it for transaction. And one of the reasons is the petrodollar. So in the 70s, again, the US struck a deal with the Saudis and they said, as long as you accept to sell your oil in US dollar, will protect you. Will protect you. We know militarily we're gonna protect you. And then they accepted the deal, and then that's where the petrodollar name come from. Just the fact that country when they transact in buying or selling oil, they use dollar, US dollar. Okay. Another reason is also Eurobond. For some reason, some countries just decide to issue their sovereign debt in US dollar. For sometimes they have no option, right? If you want, for an investor, let's say if you are Argentina, and then the government in Argentina wants to borrow money, well, no one will accept to be repaid in Argentinian currency because they know the Argentinian currency value, will keep decreasing. So they will require that they repay the debt in US dollar, right? And that again means people have to get hand on euro dollar, like the dollar outside the US system. Like I said, there are countries that use actually, like Zimbabwe use US dollar for currency right now. El Salvador also use US dollar as currency. So essentially they don't have their national currency, they just use US dollar. So that's the reason the US dollar is still dominant. And if you travel, you go anywhere in this world, there is nowhere you go and then you give US dollar, people will say, we're not gonna accept it. They will accept it. They might not accept Canadian dollar, they might not even accept the euro, but they will accept, US dollar, okay? So countries are actually trying to challenge that, that hegemony, if you will, okay? So it started with euro. One of the reasons they created euro is to kind of, have some kind of, counterparty to the US, right? But is it succeeding? Probably not, because right now I think the euro is maybe on the verge of collapsing if they don't, because you have a bunch of countries that don't have the same similar economic structure. On one hand, you have, Germany. On the other hand, you have Greece and Italy. And they have totally different way of managing their fiscal policy, right? So who knows how long, the euro gonna stay, they're gonna stay together as a euro a currency area, okay? And then you have the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now they added, I think Saudi Arabia, I don't know which one, Ethiopia, Iran. I think they had 3 or 4 countries. I don't remember on top of my head that, it's no longer BRIC, but it's BRIC +4 or +5 now, right? And they plan to have their own currency too, again, to bypass the hegemony of dollar. And one thing that actually people, the country really are starting, worrying about, the dominance of US dollar is what happened to Russia after Russia invaded Ukraine. Essentially, the US decided to freeze all Russian assets, right? So people say, well, if I'm using your currency, I'm the country, if I'm using your currency and then you can anytime if I do something you don't like, you can just freeze my wealth, then maybe I should try to store my wealth somewhere else or in another way, like in another currency or something, right? So that's the reason the BRICS are actually planning to have also their own currency. But the currency war really is a winner take all. We can't really have too many dominant currency. We can only have one. See, right? So who's gonna be next? Who knows, right? For now, the US is still the king, the US dollar. Okay. So what is the main issue of fiat currency, right? We saw commodity money prior to gold and the silver. We saw the issue. It's really the same similar issue. Inflation is the issue, right? Again, printing too much money, okay? So what is inflation, okay? Inflation is just the rise of overall price in the economy, right? So that can be due to many reasons, right? But I'm going to try to simplify it. We have two types essentially of inflation. We have what we call CPI inflation, which is consumer price inflation, okay? Like the goods and services. People really don't like that one because it assumes that we all have the same spending habit. Like, what I spend my money on is the same thing that you guys spend your money on, which is not true, right? Because it's a representative good. So inflation should be, especially the CPI inflation, should be a vector based on what you spend your stuff on, right? Okay. But it's mostly due to cost of production. So anytime the cost of production goes up, you tend to see price goes up because companies that produce the good, they have to raise the price to be able to make profit, right? And then we have a special case where natural disaster, right? That will create some shortages, and then that will cause the price to increase because supply and demand. And then we have something called imported inflation. Imported inflation means like inflation that is somewhat, let's say if China, they're having inflation and then we are importing things from China, well, already in China, the prices are going up. When we import them here, they're going to be up too. So that's what is called imported inflation, which is also part of CPI, right? Because CPI, it doesn't matter whether we produce the good here or elsewhere. It's just like what we spend our money on. So I'm not going to be really focusing too much on that because it's something that's going to be there regardless of whether we have the gold standard or what. It's going to be there. The issue is the monetary inflation, which is called also currency debasement. So essentially printing too much money, like what we saw during the COVID. Like whenever we print too much money, then the base money going to go up, and then that will cause prices to go up too. So what is the level that we don't want to see? Typically, the range is the growth of money should be in line with the growth of production, the growth of output, right? So what is produced in the economy? So if the economy is growing at 2% or 3%, then the growth of money also should go at 2 to 3%. If we go above that, then that means money is growing faster than the economy, and then that will cause inflation. Yes? Oh. Yes. Yeah. So I read long time ago exactly that's what happened, because what Germany experimented during that era is the same thing that is happening actually in some country like Argentina. So they just print too much money, right? Too much money chasing fewer goods, and that will cause prices to go up, right? So that's exactly what happened. So the moment you see like hyperinflation, because consumer price inflation shouldn't go up to hyperinflation. So hyperinflation is inflation that is above 50%. So when you see hyperinflation, typically that means we printing too much money, right? That's what this means, and most likely is based on currency debasement. Okay. So let's see inflation. You can see that I try to not use graph, but as an economist, there is no way I can finish without using graph. But we can see clearly that after the 2000, if you recall, we have the base money goes parabolic. The same thing with inflation, went up, shoot up, okay, to up to 8% in the US. It's coming down now, and even last print, it was 3.8 or 7. So it's still coming down, but it's still higher than what they want. They want it to be between 3 and 2%, in line with the growth rate of Canadian economy, all right? In the US, yes?
When, like, weren't running at 20.
So yeah, so it's still, there was too much money was printed, but at that time, the difference between now is that the debt level to GDP, right? So the amount, think about it as, the amount of debt that you have compared to what you earn. So it was at really manageable level, right? So in this case, the central bank can actually increase interest rate without risk of breaking some things. But now the debt level is really high. So again, when the interest rates are high, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because yes, we as mortgage, we pay our mortgage, we're going to pay, if you have variable rate, you're going to pay higher rate, but the government also would have to pay higher interest for its debt, right? So back then, the government was able to go all the way to, I think it was double-digit interest rate. Right now, there's no way they can do that. Why? Because it's gonna also hurt the government, right? So that's the reason. So in the 80s, yes, they could do it because the debt level is still relatively manageable. But now for their best interest, they don't want to. There is no way we're going to see interest rate in double digit right now, right? Because that will break definitely many things, right? And then the government doesn't want that, right? Yeah, they're printing, they borrow too much, right? The debt level is too high, right? Okay. So the US, again, the same thing, inflation up. Really, the US and the Canada is kind of like they exactly similar in terms, the economic structure and even the economic, statistics. Argentina, 120. That's way more than the hyperinflation level. 120%, right? Inflation rate. We're gonna see. I'm gonna do some simulation. I'm gonna show you different, Jonathan say, but yeah, the US dollar, yeah, US debt is actually going parabolic too. By hour, is going up by 1.2 billion. The US debt, and that's due to also interest payment, actually, due to interest payment too. Okay, so Argentina currently more than 100%, 120%. Okay, Zimbabwe, that's one trick, right? So you have to really think that here, what we have, yes, we can see went up and then come down, but inflation is actually increasing. So think about it, like, if you and your friend are in different cars, right? You are driving at 50 miles an hour for like, let's say 10 hours, and he's driving like 120 an hour. He's going to be way ahead of you, right? So even if he slow down, he's way ahead of you, right? So that's what happened here. So yes, it slowed down because prices are still increasing, but not at the same pace as before, right? So that's the reason you can see like it's kind of almost zero, but again, it's a scaling issue too, right? Because it went all the way to 800%. Now it came down to, maybe around 50. It's still higher hyperinflation. And the prices are already, they already are way up anyway. So it's still, they are still having struggle. They have problem of inflation still. Okay. So Turkey inflation, the same thing too. It's going up, right? 60% definitely above the hyperinflation levels. Okay. So before I go, before I forget, I have some bills here. We can please put it back. It's for that I can, yeah. Okay. You can just look at pass it around. I don't know if I can see. What is the trillion dollar in this one? The $100 trillion. Yeah.
There you go. One
100 trillion. Sorry for those of you watching from home. I have my colleague Brandon bring some currency, brought some currency, and then I'm kind of, sharing it with the people here physically present with me. And the part of the bill, I think there is 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar, like one bill, which has a value on paper of 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar. Have you seen it? Was it there?
Yes, it was.
Was there? Yeah. It has some here too.
Yeah.
For him.
It's like in Germany with the wheelbarrows of millions of bucks.
Yeah, there's a Canada.
All right, I think they can share it and so sorry, I'm just again showing the currency. So what is the main issue of inflation? So essentially with inflation, money stop fulfilling the three functions that we mentioned earlier. And it goes gradually, really. Okay? So is not
Yeah, how much is it in US?
huh? Yeah, it's 100 trillion, but it shouldn't cost. How much is it now? 200? $5? Yeah, $5, 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars is worth just $5. So, yeah. So the main issue, so like I mentioned, the function, and by if you will, like the function, they don't cease to exist altogether, right? They go gradually, right? Yes? Yeah. Like which, like you're talking about Zimbabwe? Well, so you have to bring, so what they did, which is good, they just use US dollar now. They don't use anymore, Zimbabwean dollar, right? So they use US dollar as currency. So as a result, that the issue of money is, that will bring trust in terms of, economic transaction. Because before then, I remember back in 2013, I was in my home country and I was working for a think tank, and I travel a lot, part of my job, and then I usually, at that time, I met, people from Zimbabwe. They say when they are paid, they literally have to run away, right away to spend the money. Otherwise, if they wait like an hour, yeah, it's
Same thing in Germany.
exactly. You have to literally run, right, to spend the money. But now they don't have to do it. And the reason is now because the money stopped to play the store of value, right? You cannot keep it for like even more than 1 day. So money stopped to play that store of value function. So with persistent inflation, money stop, playing. That's the one thing to go, right? Store of value gone, because you keep it for 1 day, the value of it gonna go away, right? You're gonna lose some value. The unit of account, the second thing to fail, right? So we can no longer use, the same yardstick, if you will, right? Because now things that cost $2 yesterday, today is $5. So it's kind of, difficult to compare, the value of goods in that situation. So the unit of account, money after unit of account, also the property goes away, all right? And then we have the medium of exchange, which is the last one to actually go away. Is like, because people are still going to try to get away with it, right? If I give me, maybe if I'm in Zimbabwe, give me $100 trillion, I just going to go quickly to spend it so that, I don't have to, I can, if I can buy bread with it or, milk, whatever I can buy, I will spend it. But then if the problem continues, then even that ceases to exist too. So all the three functions of money will stop, and essentially you're going to end up with, Zimbabwean currency worthless, and then they have to use US dollar for us as a medium of exchange. Another thing that we don't, even when we don't have, hyperinflation, inflation is still a hidden tax. We'll see it later, next slide, I think, right? So it's a hidden tax because things, every time we just devalue the currency, right? Slowly, maybe. Even in Canada, it's going down slowly, but it's a hidden tax because we don't see it. It's not something because we don't have to pay for it, but whenever we buy something, we see that the price of the same amount, the same quantity that we buy, you have to spend more. Like things that I buy $1, 6 months from now, I have to pay $1.02 or on 20 cents or something like that. Okay. Another issue with inflation, people who are aware of this, they not gonna, even in Canada, they're not gonna hold money as historic value. Even in Canada, people don't use money as historic value, right? So you don't keep your money, you don't keep like $10,000 at home under your pillow or in the backyard and then say, okay, I'm gonna use it in 20 years. That I mean, if you do that, don't do it, right? so because you're gonna lose your purchasing power. So what happened is people start, investing, right? So that's the reason there is a difference between savings and investment, because investment is taking additional risk. Savings, I don't have to take risk, right? If I work and then I'm able to keep, let's say, $100, why should they invest it? I can just keep it and then maybe use it in 20 years, as long as I can keep the value, all right? I don't have to take addition, I don't have to gamble, if you will. Unfortunately, that's what fiat currency is pushing people to do, right? Even when we buy a home, we actually, what we call it forced savings, right? The reason we call it forced saving because, you're not keeping the money in your backyard, you actually spending it in your house and hoping that, the value of the house is going to go up. Again, the reason is because of fiat money, because we're using housing as above their utility value. So I don't see any difference between car and, I mean, our brain is wired that way. We can think, okay, house is kind of investment, but we just use it for sleeping, right? Is sleeping, eating, and then that's it. The same car, we use car to go to work. So we don't use car for investment. In fact, the moment you buy a new car, you drive out of parking lot, the value goes down. The home are not like that. Why? Because we have a liquidity premium on top of the utility value of the house, right? So if we don't have that liquidity, if we have a way, let's say if there is a way where we can save our money without the value of it going down, the utility of, the monetary premium of the house will go away. We're just going to be left with the utility value. It's still going to have value, but just the utility value of the house, right? So that's what one of the reasons. And another reason, if income inequality, right? I'm still on time. Income inequality, we're almost done. 10 more slides under this. So income inequality is the Cantillon effect. The Cantillon effect is like people closer to the printer will be the one that benefit more from the money printer. Remember what I tell you, like when the government issue debt, who buy the debt? Institutions. Who are the institutions? Rich people, pretty much, right? Rich people are the one, right? You and I, we don't have access to that, right? I mean, we try to do through investment, but that's kind of gambling too. But they have access to information and they have access to capital. So whenever the government issue debt, the people who benefit from it are actually people closer to the money printer, whether they are politicians, whether they're big banker, whether they are, big hedge funds, all the people, you name them, they're going to be the one actually benefiting from them. Okay, so that's what is called the Cantillon effect, and that's the reason inflation creates income inequality. The richer get, more richer, and then the poor, become more poor. Okay, so when I told you that this is the purchasing power of $100, right? So $100 with different inflation rate. With 3% inflation, which is what Canadian Bank of Canada is aiming for. So we have, slow decay in the purchasing power of the 100, right? It's kind of slow, the blue line. But with 50% inflation, by the 12 years, essentially the value of the 100 asymptotically, like, almost close to zero, almost zero. You can say even zero by the 12 to 13 years. With 100% inflation within, like, the 8 years, not even the 80, the 6 and 7 years, the value of the 100 is completely evaporated with 100% inflation, right? So things that you can buy for 100 now, you cannot buy them with the same 100. Essentially, no one will take it. And that's the reason in Zimbabwe, with the high inflation rate, they have to come with a big bill, like 100 trillion, because nobody will take, $100, because they're worthless, right? Okay. So that's the issue with, inflation, okay? And this is another example of inflation, like the US dollar, the value of it, like in 2019, I guess, or 10, $26. By 2020, it's only worth $1 in real, in purchasing power. In purchasing power, like things that you can buy with the same, amount, with the same currency, the same amount of money, if you will. Okay. That's for those of you who are watching from home, this is the $100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars, right? Again, why we have this big, huge bill? Because you cannot buy anything with $100. You cannot buy anything with $500. You cannot even buy something with, $1 billion. So they have to come up with this 100 trillion Zimbabwean currency, right? And according to my colleague, Brandon, is actually worth $5 now. So, all right. Yeah. Yeah.
Things go so bad, they stop. Because like most countries, when they are using their natural resources, they also at times have to follow some international rules.
Yeah.
Is there anything with the money printing that also is applicable for every country, that they have to follow some international rules? Right?
So the only international rule, the question is, if there is some kind of international gatekeeper, right, for preventing country to issue money, the only institution that we have is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, right? And even them, sometimes, they cannot do anything. The only thing they can do is to kind of give emergency loan, right, to government like Argentina. But the only problem, sometimes they come with very, very strong kind of, requirement. And sometimes countries don't want to do that. And particularly for Zimbabwe, during Mugabe, he tried to do land reform. It wasn't really popular in the Western world because the landowners are mostly white. And then he said, no, he's going to take it away from them and then give it to black Zimbabwean. And then there is, a movement of, white people leaving the country. And the problem is, they are the one who were farming the land. And the one they left the land to the black people, Zimbabwean, they don't have the tools, and they didn't have, the capital to actually use the land as, the previous owner used to do. And that creates a problem. And then there is all political issue, right? And as you know, the IMF and the World Bank are controlled also by the Western, by the US, the European Union, all those things. And then because he did that, so that's some way, some kind of punishment also, right? So for Zimbabwe, that's the reason. For Argentina, it's just the social program, right? So Argentina, they have big kind of entitlement system, just like Greece. In Greece, also the same thing, right? In retirement age in Greece was, I think at that time 50 or 55, where in Germany it was like 60 or something. And that was what created the problem. And because the German says, why would we want to subsidize Greece? Because they don't want to work. Just like, the Italians too, right? So That's the reason I say maybe the euro also might be heading for a problem too, because the country fiscal structures within the Eurozone are not the same. You have, on one hand, Germany and France, on the other hand, you have Italy and Greece and Portugal. So that's the issue, right? So yeah, there are some gates, but countries are sovereign, right? They can do what they want, right? So that's the issue, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. So another way, so this one I saw it on Twitter. I'm not really 100% sure because I really take things from Twitter with a grain of salt. But it's supposed to be in Venezuela, that boulevard. So it's really worthless bills on the street. Nobody wants them. You can't imagine this in Canada, right? If you drop 100 bills, we're all gonna go collect them. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. If you. Yep. Yep. Yes. Yeah.
Stacks of pennies, like
Yeah.
pennies left all.
Yeah, because you can't buy anything with pennies unless you have a stack of them, to use them. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. Using money as weapon, right? I think in the 90s in the 90s, in Bahrain, they have that kind of attack too. So somehow, I think they drop money on the helicopter, Bahrainian dinar or whatever, and then it inundated the country, and then that's kind of, created, of course, fake, but it's kind of difficult to distinguish the two, right? So, but that's one way to attack a country too, through currency, attack, right? Like you said during the war. So I mentioned all the bad thing about, I guess, fiat. So how do we protect ourselves, right? So the worst thing to do is to keep, cash, really, you're saving cash. Because even with 3%, you are still losing your, some kind of purchasing power. So you can invest, but investing requires you to do some kind of, little bit of, research, right? So you can invest in stock, and then you can in real estate, like I mentioned, gold and silver, and other financial assets, right? Okay. So again, investment is not savings. Savings is just like, even when you put your money in the bank, like I mentioned, it's not really, yes, you save and you think it's your money, no. But if you save, you have a way to save without actually trusting anyone, then that's actually even better, without your money being the base, right? Okay. So, yes, Pamela?
What happened to Canada's savings bonds? Like Canada used to have, the government had a program, right?
Yeah.
You could, your work, whatever.
Yeah.
And be like a thing, and then all of a sudden, what happened there?
I have no idea about what happened, but my guess is, again, is because people start realizing that, the return on bonds do not actually even keep up with inflation. So if your bond is you're getting 2% return, and then the inflation is going 3%, in real term you are losing 1%, right? So let's say you buy $100 of bond. In 1 year you get $100, $102, $2 for the return, right? But in the same period, things that you buy 100 a year back now it costs $103. So you have to add an additional dollar to get the same thing that you could have bought, last year at $100.
Right, but a savings account doesn't, a savings account is the same thing. Nobody's paying interest on savings account that's worth anything. It's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's we're going to see another slide here. This slide is kind of, but if you look at it, I'm going to say, so this is the one on here. Oh, sorry. So the CR is the Canada inflation rate. So it's kind of, over this period, by 2013 is 73%. So Canada 3 months bill, like bond, like you mentioned bond, is yielding a little bit for 4.64.84%. So higher, right, than the inflation rate. But there is something even better that will give you more return. Like if you invest your money in Apple stock, look at the return. If you invest your money in Amazon, it's even better. There is a company in Canada called Shopify. I don't know if you know familiar with Shopify. The return is even higher. So remember when I told you again about the continuum effect? So you and I, maybe some of us are familiar with the stock market, maybe you're not. So people who benefit from this, people with this knowledge will benefit from it because you're going to put your money in bond or in a mutual fund that will give you maybe 2-3% per year. Whereas if you do some research, you can actually get, but again, it's a gambling too. It's not guaranteed, right? So that's what the problem for fiat money, it pushes people to gamble with their money because you keep it in cash, you're going to lose the value, right? So, but the bond are the best, the next to best. Instead of, holding in cash, maybe you can hold your money in bond, GIC or something like that, right? Yes?
Isn't that the same kind of thing? Like when they were legalizing marijuana,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are like, hey, I'm going to put stock in marijuana, and
Yeah.
then it just crashed.
Yeah.
Because there was no supply.
Exactly. Exactly.
And same thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you risk anything, but I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like investment is risky, right? So one thing you can do is maybe to definitely some people once they start doing investment. I started doing investment long back, and I was trying to be smart, trying to say, okay, I'm gonna go buy penny stock, like stock that are really cheap. So hopefully they're gonna grow up, right? They're gonna go buy big, and then I'm gonna be rich. But penny stock usually are very, very risky, right? So it's better to invest in established company like Amazon or even Apple, because Apple is really great company. They build stuff and the people buy their stuff. And you look at them, you know that for the foreseeable future, there is no reason for Apple to go bankrupt. Whereas if you go small company that just started in what we call startup, they are really, really risky, right? But again, the fiat money actually pushes people to gamble, right? Because you don't want to hold your cash, right? You just have to find a way to keep your value. Essentially what we're doing, we're trying to keep the value of our energy. Really, again, it goes back to our energy because we work, we get paid, we spend portion of our income, we have extra, and then we want to keep it for later. But we don't want to keep it in cash because it's going to be debased. If we're in Canada and the US, actually we are lucky. If you're in Zimbabwe or in Argentina, you're not that lucky, right? Because your money, essentially, every month, the value of it just keep decreasing, right? So that's the issue. But even within Canada, even being in Canada, the US, we still have to try to keep up with inflation, and we have to kind of do some kind of gambling, investing to keep up with inflation, right? Okay. So is fiat money doomed to fail? So according to me, yes. And the reason is, as long as the government keep running fiscal deficit, meaning if they are spending more than they earn, then they're gonna have to borrow, right? Even if you are in the US, like the US is the country that people think is solvable, they will pay their debt because they are most powerful country in the world. But even then, at some point, it will be a problem for them. They have to, yes.
Also politicians decide not to pay or raise the debt ceiling, then they won't be able to pay down the interest on their debt.
Exactly. Exactly. So in the US, what they're doing, instead of fixing the problem, so imagine you have a credit card of 10,000 credit limit. So you can pay the $10,000, and then you say, okay, I'm gonna go to the bank. They're gonna raise my limit now to 15,000, and then you spend all the way to 15,000, and then you're gonna go again, raise it to 20,000, 30,000. That's what they're doing. They keep revolving the debt, right? So if they issue debt to finance the deficit, yes, it's going to be a problem. And also another issue is trade deficit. For developing country, definitely trade deficit is a problem, because trade deficit means like you buying more from abroad than they're buying from you. And then if you are buying more from abroad, you have to convert your currency to the partner. So you're going to have to print more money to do that. And then that will debase the currency again, right? So what is the future of money? Like Charles de Gaulle in 1965, he actually advocated of going back to the gold standard, like going back to the commodity money, right? Like the gold standard where the amount of money in circulation is really tied to the amount of gold that we have in some proportion, the amount of gold we have in the central bank vault, right? Because his issue at that time is really because the US was actually spending more, or they printing more than the gold that they have. So he's saying, I don't trust the US dollar because right now they're not, on par with the fixed rate we have, the stock gold that we established in 1944 agreement. Now we want to have another one so that, we have this kind of, um, um, return, if you will, to sound money, what they call sound money or the hardest money, okay? So, which brings me to my pitch here. I think, the future of money is really based, as we know from over all this year, is technology that disrupt, the money, right? So now we have, money. I don't want to have this future. So I think there is hope in the Bitcoin, unlike most what people think that is kind of, make-believe money or something like that. Is actually something that, just like gold, you have to mine it. You mine it not with land, but you mine it using computer power. Okay? But next season, I would say the sequel for my presentation gonna be on Bitcoin next year. Okay? All right. Thank you. Any comment or questions? I know that we have people following. If you have question, you can can they talk? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do you have question? Question, comments? I think that's good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I earn my Indian dollars very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Kenya, I convert.
Mm-hmm.
Then I want to go to the country of Tanzania.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But as I pass along the way, there are these small hawkers buy something, they still want US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Did explain that.
Mm-hmm.
But do you see a situation where, or rather I ask myself, why can't we are neighboring countries, why can't you accept my Kenyan shilling? When you come over, I can accept your Tanzanian shilling.
Yeah.
A situation where small economies will come to that kind of an agreement, especially with the emergence of technology.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think especially for African country, so the question is about why African currency are not convertible, like exchangeable, right, between, let's say, Tanzania and Kenya. So you're saying Kenya would accept the Tanzanian currency, but Tanzania wouldn't accept Kenyan currency, or they don't accept?
No, sometimes they do.
Okay.
Even the small holders or the small traders pay US dollars.
US dollar. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm thinking there's a transaction cost there.
Yeah.
For me exchanging and then exchanging again.
Yeah.
So with the technology, I'm thinking I can go to the internet, okay, one Kenya shilling, exchange.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You see a situation where maybe that might happen.
Not, I don't see. I mean, you can always use technology to do the conversion faster, I guess. But the problem is, I think, with the convertibility issue is that, the economy are not, and that's one of the constraint to integration of our African economies. Like in West Africa, we have a common currency for 8 countries, which is based on, well, historically it was based on, the French francs, and then migrated to Euro. It's still, fixed to Euro. But we have the same currency, so we don't have that problem. So for example, in Niger and Mali, we have the same border. Essentially, we can use it's the same currency, right? And we have a neighbor in Nigeria. They have Naira, which is different, but in the cross-border town, we don't have the issue that you mentioned. Really, people exchange Naira to franc CFA, easily. And the reason maybe it's different because we have fixed exchange rate between franc CFA, which is the local currency in West Africa, and the euro. So for Nigerians, when they get hold of franc CFA, that's essentially a ticket for them also to get euro, because there is a fixed exchange rate, right? So that's the reason, maybe the trans-border trade between Niger and Nigeria is kind of, they take, the both local currency, either franc CFA or Naira. We don't have the same issue. But here's the problem though. In West Africa, they also have a common currency, and they have the same kind of franc CFA, which is based on euro, like fixed to the euro, but their franc CFA and our West African franc are not convertible. So, which is kind of a paradox, right? So, but the technology that you mentioned, I think, yeah, the technology can be used to maybe, in terms of competition to be quickly the conversion rate, but it's still, the issue is going to be there, because they are using the dollar as the anchor currency, right? So they have to convert to dollar and then to Kenyan shilling, or from Kenyan shilling to Tanzanian, to dollar and then to Tanzanian currency. So the dollar is still going to be there as, as the intermediary, if you would, right? Okay. Another question? Yes, Esther? Exchange rate. With euro.
Why was there Canadian to US is changing the reason? How can they?
So yeah, that's a very good question. So the question about why there is a fixed exchange rate, maybe in general from country to country, right? In general, maybe not even only the. So exchange rate is just the price of one currency in terms of another, right? So Canadian dollar for US dollar, or US dollar for Canadian dollar. In the currency, the exchange rate between Canadian dollar and the US dollar is floating rate. So that means flexible. So every day you wake up, there is a different rate, right? So that's flexible. But some country, they decide to say, we don't want that. We want to fix the exchange rate, so that, if you wake up tomorrow, it's still gonna be, let's say, in 639, I think 600 something for euro, 600 francs CFA for 1 euro. And that's been there since the euro was created. It hasn't changed, right? But there is things behind the door, behind the closed door, that is happening. So essentially, it's not really fixed. It's only fixed in terms that, that's really what you see. But the central bank would have to actively intervene in the foreign exchange market to buy or sell to keep the price constant. So let's say you don't want the price of something to go up, right? Or to go down. You just want it to be, let's say, $10. So you're gonna have to have, a bunch of fund, so that, whenever it's kind of, $9, then you go and buy it so that the price goes up to 10. If it goes to $11, then you sell it so that the price go back to 10. So there is that active intervention of the central bank to maintain that fixed exchange rate. Essentially, the market is still, there, but it's just like someone is actually behind the closed door trying to maintain that price. In this case, for currency, for the West African country currency, and then the euro, the convertibility is actually guaranteed. Up to very recently, it was guaranteed by the French Treasury, but there is a counter thing that they need to do. So for that guaranteed, all the money that the central bank, in terms of foreign exchange, they receive, they have to keep it, a certain percentage of it at the treasury in France. So that, let's say if, we have a country in West Africa that sell like coffee beans. We have a country that sell uranium. We have a country that sell, cocoa beans, all those things, So when they sell it, they receive, foreign exchange. They receive dollar. So the dollar would be actually be kept in the French treasury. And that's how the French is able to guarantee that convertibility of, French CFA to euro at, that fixed parity, right? But recently though, because there are so many outcry in West Africa saying like, the currency is still controlled by the former colony, France, and then France decide to say, we don't want that. You take your foreign exchange. You guys have to manage your own foreign exchange, and then we have nothing to do with it now. But it's still on paper though, right? But technically that's what happened, right? So that's the way that they can maintain the fixed exchange rate. It happened in Mexico in 1990. I don't know if you hear about the tequila crisis. The tequila crisis, actually, the Mexican pesos was pegged to the US. But, again, because the central bank of Mexico have to intervene to maintain that parity, at some point, they ran out of dollar to actually intervene. And then they couldn't keep up. Then they let just the market to decide, and then the peso price collapse, right? And that's what causes, what we know as the tequila crisis in the 90s, mid-90s in Mexico, right? So there are benefits from fixed exchange rates, but you have to have a lot of resources to maintain that. Because if you run out of resources, then people can detect that they can also do what we call speculative attack on the currency. And then they can try to say, they'll call you a bluff essentially. They'll say, you don't have enough reserve to maintain that currency. So we're going to try to do some manipulation to see up to one point you're going to break, and then the currency can just collapse. And that's what happened for Mexico in the 90s, mid-90s. Right? Okay. Yes? Yeah.
That is minimized.
Yeah.
The value of the
Yes. Yes.
So,
yeah, so that's a great question. I think you are referring to the impact of inflation on credit, right? So yeah, any type of loan, right? So inflation is kind of and that's because people form expectation on inflation, right? So because inflation is something that we think gonna be in the future. So when you get into a contract like a debt contract, so I borrow money from you, I say I'll pay you like in 2 years. So in 2 years, many things can happen, right? Inflation can increase, it can decrease. So depending on how we position, sometimes inflation will be beneficial for the people, the person who borrowed, and sometimes if it goes down, it will benefit people who you lend money to, right? So there is that redistribution of income. Essentially, what I usually give example, because we use it in principle of economic course. Let's say I have $1,000, I want to use them to buy, let's say, a computer. And you ask my friend, you come to me and said, right now I can buy the computer with the same specification at $1,000. But you come to me to say, I have a problem. Can you give me the $1,000, right? So I say, I will give you $1,000, but repay me in 1 year, right? In 1 year exactly, you, as a good borrower, you came back to me and you gave me the $1,000. I didn't ask for any interest. I didn't ask anything. Then I take, the $1,000 now, happy, I go to Apple store and I say, I want the same computer that I wanted to buy last year with the same specification. To my surprise, they will say, now it's actually $1,200, right? So inflation went up. So now who benefit from this debt situation? You benefited from it. I'm worse off, you are better off, because now things that I could buy for $1,000, now I have to add $200 to buy the same amount. I should probably come back to you to say, hey, the $1,000 that I gave you last year, now I have to, buy the same computer that I told you I'm gonna buy. I have to actually add another $200. Can you give me the $200? Maybe if you're a good friend, you'll say, I will give you, no problem, I have. Otherwise, you say, no, you gave me $1,000, I'm gonna give you $1,000. But in this case, then I'm worse off. So there is a redistribution of income from me to you. It's like, I'm worse off, you are $200 more, and I'm $200 short, right? So that's what you are talking about. So definitely that create that issue with inflation, especially when I don't anticipate that inflation. Now, if I have perfect foresight in knowing that in 1 year, inflation gonna go up by 20%, then I will tell you, hey, I have this $1,000, but if you're gonna pay me in 1 year, you're gonna have to pay me $1,200 because I know that computer gonna cost $200 now, right? But the problem is, again, whenever we start in term forecasting, we're not God, right? You know, we just do our best. We can be right, we can be wrong, or we can overestimate. So we don't, right? So, okay, yeah. Question from the people listening. I don't know. I don't know if you are able. Let me see if. There is no question. They didn't say any question. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Just comment. Okay. Great comment. Yeah. All right. Any questions? Comment? Well, thank you for being here on this Friday afternoon. It's almost 9 o'clock now, right? Or even past 9, almost 9. I really appreciate you for. What do you invest in? Not a financial advice, but you know, I can tell you what not to do. Definitely don't keep your cash, your excess cash in cash. Try to just don't do that one, right? Do anything except that, right? Of course, you know, the less risk you can take, the better it is. The less risk you can take, the better it is for you. But you know, keeping cash is the most risky. I think definitely, you know, for sure your money gonna go down 3% every year, even in good time, right? Even in good time, your money, the purchasing power of your money gonna go down by 3%, right? Yeah. You're welcome. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for connecting. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, they could talk. Okay, thank you. Hey guys. Hi, that's my kid.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Tonton. How are you?
Not too bad. Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for attending, Tonton. Thank you.
Thank you. For investment, they can diversify their investment to minimize risk.
Yep. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.